This episode of the Design Your Dream Home podcast is brought to you by Porcelanosa. With 30 showrooms in the United States and Canada, Porcelanosa is a luxury lifestyle brand that'll make your next project's dream into a reality. From a wide selection of tiles and mosaics to modern bathroom and kitchen cabinetry designs, Porcelanosa makes it easy to bring modern European design elements into your home. Visit porcelanosa-usa.com to learn more. You are listening to the Design Your Dream Home podcast with Doug and Steve. Doug and Steve are architects, and they're here to help you design your dream home.
LA-based David Applebaum, the architect to the stars. He brings his experience to the entire design and building process in both historical and modern designs. His client list includes Cuba Gooding Jr., Diane, Keaton, Frank Sinatra, Rupert Murdoch, Bob Hope, among others. David graduated from Texas A&M University and received his master's degree in architecture from UCLA in 1984. That's probably how he got to California and started meeting some of these stars, I guess. David was also the host of the TV show American Mansions on National Geographic. American Mansions explored the personalities behind America's greatest estates. Welcome to the program, David Applebaum.
Hi, Stephen. And
Hey, David.
How are you guys? I'm originally from Texas, and I'm at that point now where I've been here for 30-some odd years, where I get caught between whether to say y'all or you guys. I'm a lost man.
No, we've been trying to do this for a little while, so thank you very much, David. We know each other because we have a person in common that were trying to connect us to do some kind of television program together. And I said, I don't know if we'll get along. He goes, no, I want that. I think you guys will probably fight. I said, oh, okay.
We've not at all.
No, actually, we don't. But he was hoping we would.
Yeah, they all do. They all want drama. Why do people want drama in their lives? We should be looking. It's kind of like the basis of architecture. It should be welcoming, and there should be balance, and there should be flow, and there should be interchange. That's the way all of life should be.
Conflict sells on TV anyway.
Yeah, but not in. Yeah. And if anybody here has been married, you understand conflict.
Well, it may work for television, but anyway, it's another topic. I mean, both Doug and I, we both wondered. I mean, your client list is ridiculous. So, I mean, how does that happen? How does that start?
Circumstance. I live in Los Angeles. I would say at least 25% of the population has something to do with entertainment. You don't list in there also all of the tour managers and all of the grips and all of the directors that people don't know names of. And it's really just the population here. Some of it has been fortuitous. I mean, I'll be very honest with you. As an architecture student, you're almost always trained in modernism and nothing else. Mm-hmm. And that's just because I think it's easier to get into the artistic sculpture of modern architecture and not debate the historical significance and authenticity of certain projects. And to be quite honest, a lot of the professors don't have that much historical background. And the last job that I took before I went on my own was purposefully for someone who is really good at traditional work. Because, the story that I like to tell is when I turned in my thesis project, I was offered jobs at Frank Gehry's office and Morphosis and Eric Owen Moss and all people that I admired and loved so much. Well, these offices were not the kind of conditions that I wanted, the working kind of conditions. It was a lot of bullpen work and not a lot of individual creativity, and then synthesizing that work with other intelligent, creative people to come up with the best possible solution. And also at that time, which was in the mid to late 80s, modern was not as popular as it is now. And a lot of people here in Los Angeles were looking for that Italian look. And I wanted to know the difference between Northern Italian and Southern Italian and authentic work. So I took a job at this person's office, and not getting into too many personalities involved with it, There came a time that some of the clients that he had expressed that they would rather work with me individually than work in that environment. And that's kind of how I got Frank Sinatra's job, for instance. Whoa. Started off as doing a train room. He was very into model trains, very into model trains. And so the house that my boss had done for him in Rancho Mirage, he said, I want more room for my trains. He had a second master bedroom for his trains, and it wasn't enough. So I basically converted 3/4 of his attic into a 2,000 square foot train room. And my personal attention got his attention. And so when it came time to do the next project, it kind of went to me directly.
Do you find that you get a lot of the same clients you currently have? So you work for somebody, and then another year later, you're working for them again, and then working for them again, then you work for the friends, and
I wish I had more friends. Not I had more friends. I wish I had more friends of friends. There's a couple of clients in particular. Some of my famous clients are really big about not letting anybody know that they did anything big and fancy. Oh. I don't necessarily want to drop a lot of names, but a couple of them said, we want this house to look like my stuntman lives here, not the producer. Okay. So, I had one house, a very famous movie star said, I want the first thing that you see to be the kitchen. And it was like, what? He said, I want you to see the kitchen. I want you to open the door and immediately know, hey, I'm going to make you a sandwich if you want, because you're my friend. And so, going from winning an Academy Award to
my gosh,
wanting that's a pretty interesting mix. Anyway, to get back to your question, sorry, I meander. I wonder how many of us architects have ADD, and we become architects because we have to switch. It's like, oh, I'm bored with this. Well, let me do this plan drawing instead of the section right now. And then you stay stimulated. Doug, it's funny that you asked that, because if you would have asked me maybe 6 months ago to say, what are you talking about? But it's funny, I'm actually doing 2 projects right now for repeat clients. I'm doing, I did 2 remodelings and an addition to one house in Bel Air that I'm now doing a brand new. The one room I hated was the dark library. And now I'm redoing that, and it's going to be wonderful. And this guy, I love this project in particular because he has the best art of any project I've ever done. So my work looks amazing because it's highlighting the art, not the building. And that is just, I should say that to me, one of my philosophies is to take my fingerprints off of the project. Most of these clients are spending a major portion of their personal fortune to do their home. And therefore, and that's the reason why, to dovetail to an earlier subject, why I work for the traditional architect. I would like to consider myself an artist with an expression, but my job is to find the style of my client and make that the best that it possibly can be. So if they want country cottage, I do country cottage. And if they want modern, I do modern. One of my repeat offenders, I just finished one project where we did, I'll just say, a hidden room that you got to it on an Indiana Jones style rope bridge.
No.
With slats of wood.
Dude.
Now, clients do you have that say, I want a fire pole to go from the second floor to the first floor, and I want an Indiana Jones bridge to go to my game room. Oh my God, how much fun is that?
How much fun? That's insane. That's like a dream job. So are houses or projects getting smaller in the last 5 to 10 years for you? I mean, across the country in house design, we're seeing that.
Well, yes, but there's a couple of reasons for that. One of them is the plight of the modern architect. We are doing battle with HGTV. This is and other similar networks where they're so busy telling everybody, hey, you can flip a house. It's not a problem. They don't go into all of the background that goes into getting a permit. I mean, you'll notice that none of these flipped projects are in Los Angeles, where you no longer get a permit. You have to get a building permit, a street use permit, a green building permit, a Title 24 allocation of environmental resources approval. You need to get scenic approval. You need to get planning and zoning approval. You needed to go through so many hoops. It now, I believe, so one reason is because there are less jobs than there used to be, because professional and amateur flippers are taking half of the stock out of the market, and we don't have as much work as we used to have. Then you add to the fact that if you want to build a house in Los Angeles, and I forgot, because that was all part of this. There's also an anti-McMansion rule here. And every house is smaller than it's ever been allowed to be. Property values in the best neighborhoods in Los Angeles dropped because you went from being able to build a 12,000 square foot house to a 9,800 square foot house. Wow. And so since there was less available square footage, the property value was less, because the property in Los Angeles is not what's valuable. I'm sorry, I take that back. Well, the property is the most valuable, but it's only valuable if you can build the maximum amount of square footage.
Right.
So
max out your FAR. Wow, boy, there's so many questions. Stephen?
Yeah. So what I was going to add to that before you get to that is it now costs at least another $100,000 to build a house in Los Angeles. Because you have to widen the street, you have to put in solar panels, you have to set up for an electrical car, you have to do all of these things that the city or the state is requiring you to do. That means that if you had a $500,000 budget, you now have a $350,000 to $400,000 budget. Which
so it sounds like the government's really gotten involved in the building industry.
Yes.
Local government.
Yeah. Well, it's when it's easy for an individual to go to take an image from a television show, find laborers in the parking lot of the Home Depot store, and think they can do it on their own. I think that that 1 out of 100 people that messes it up creates rules for all of us. Oh, here's a new one. Do I mention a name? A very rich man whose 2 daughters are supermodels and is a big deal in Los Angeles got a permit for a 20,000 square foot house. He built a 45,000 square foot house.
Wow.
And he basically said to the city, what are you going to do about it?
Right.
And there's a big lawsuit, and guess what? He's not going to be made to tear it down because the city has no teeth. No teeth. So because of that, they then make rules that make life more difficult for us law-abiding citizens that get a permit, because that is our legal right, our legal responsibility. Right. Is to follow all rules and get a permit and have a contract and do all those other things. And so these idiots make it difficult for us. I mean, just as another aside, I was doing a house in Beverly Hills years ago, and the plan checker said to me, "Oh, how are you doing with our facade rule?" I said, "What facade rule?" He said, "Oh, we got so sick and tired of people building awful, oversized McMansions. I call them wedding cakes. It's like a square 9x12 with another square 9x12 with the frosting all over it, and then they put a Pizza Hut roof on it so that they can get a bit of a pitch and still meet the maximum height." And so they said, it's funny, we actually took 4 of your designs because you're always moving your facade in and out, and we created a mathematical formula that every single facade had to have a certain proportion of it step back a percentage of the width of the property. And he says that we based it on yours, so I'm not even going to check your facade this time because we based it on your rules, so we'll give you this one grandfather.
Huh? Wow.
Yeah,
that's like the zoning laws in New York City in like 1918. Stepping back facades. Good Lord.
Yeah. Well, look, if people are going to build square boxes with Pizza Hut roofs,
right,
and 2 lions and 7 columns in the front and a 2-story entry, and they all look alike and they have no personality, why wouldn't you? I mean,
sure, but the challenge is you got to know all these rules. It's got to be crazy.
Someone asked me recently, why is it that most architects in Los Angeles specialize? And I said it's because of all the rules. Because what it takes to know how to build a house in Los Angeles, the rules for strip centers is completely different. And the rule for a 5-story building is even more completely different. And so I would basically be starting like a 24-year-old wet behind my ears kid at an architecture school if I were to do a 20-story building.
Gotcha.
So, but if you want to do a house, I've got all that on the back of my hand. Yeah.
Well, I want to go back for 1 second and talk about style, because a lot of homeowners think that, they look at my website and they think, oh, Steven's a modernist. He probably not the fit for me. Let's say with someone like you, maybe somebody looks at your work and says that you have a different philosophy. You say that I want to help you to find your style, right? So you wouldn't say you have a personal style, would you?
Oh boy, no, I actually do have a personal style, but it has to do more with space than solid. I find most architects have what I call an edifice complex. They only think about what the postcard is going to look like from the front, but we do not inhabit the solid walls that we're drawing. We inhabit the spaces that those walls encapsulate. And in my opinion, our job is to create a flow and a proportion and a lifestyle that is based around those spaces. Then how you decorate it's very Robert Venturi in the Long Island Duck. How you decorate it is then where you kind of add the pizzazz, but I can do that in any form or fashion. That matters less to me. Now, certainly certain ways of manipulating the space will be different in certain styles. For instance, an English Tudor style might not have a cantilever the way that a modern piece would. But for instance, I love cantilevered shelves. I don't know why, but I just love cantilevered shelves. Well, did something for Diane Keaton that was much more rustic, which is a whole nother story. Oh my gosh. She had lived in a Lloyd Wright house, and when she was looking at properties, we were looking at a Wallace Neff, which is a great residential architect in Southern California, a Wallace Neff Spanish-style house in Beverly Hills. And she looked at me and said, I don't know. I've never done traditional before. What do I do? And I gave her a history lesson, and since then, all she's done is gone from being a pure modernist to a traditionalist and loving that Spanish style. But I just made very rustic-looking, battered shelves that were still cantilevered. Personal style, yeah, I mean, I'm certainly a modernist. I've been trained that way. That's what I like. A lot of times if I'm having trouble, the interesting thing is people want that traditional house, but they want a modern space, like a great room open to a kitchen. Well, that doesn't work in the normal style. So sometimes I'll simultaneously design something modern and traditional, because that way my modern house has a little more substance to it, and my traditional house has more free space in it. Mm-hmm. So I wish I had a better answer for you, Stephen, but pretty is pretty. I have an interesting analogy. When I did Cuba Gooding Jr.'s house,
oh my God,
I asked Jay Griffith, who is a very famous modern landscaper, to do the landscape. And as we're going through the interviews of landscapers, Jay pulls me aside and said, David, I've never done a traditional garden. Why did you have me interview for this? We've been wanting to work together for years, but why this one? And I said, Jay, are you a brilliant designer? He said, well, yes, I am. I said, can you make a beautiful traditional garden? He said, of course I can. I said, then what's the problem? And he said, oh, no, I agree. It's like, I don't know why people think I can't do a traditional. You're the first one to give me the opportunity, and I can't wait. So I just think beauty is beauty. How's that for a long roundabout to get to that one answer?
No, it's a great answer.
What was working with Bob Hope like? He must have been much older.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he was. And he had some diminished capacity. He had his good days and his bad days. Let's say that.
Yeah.
The thing about Bob Hope that I remember more than anything else is I'm one of those guys that has a fear of clowns.
Okay.
Bob Hope started as a clown, and there was one room in his house that was nothing but clowns.
Oh.
Clown sculptures, clown toys, clown paintings, clown fabric on the sofa, live like mannequins dressed up as clowns. And every time I would meet with him and it was together, he would say, have David meet me in the clown room. And I would just sit there on the sofa shaking in this little ball, and he'd walk in and just start laughing. And then he'd say, okay, we can leave now. He was really, when he was on, that guy was so sharp and so funny.
Cool. Was this his house in Palm Springs?
No, this was his house in Toluca Lake.
Okay.
Which is an incorporated city within Los Angeles that was on a golf course that had its own mini golf course in the back.
Okay. Wow.
No. You know what? It's funny. The house in Palm Springs is phenomenal, and I would have, if he would have asked me, I would have loved to have worked on that.
Oh my gosh.
I actually, one of my favorite critiques during my thesis was from Lautner himself. And Lautner was a drinking buddy of that old boss that did the traditional work. And so he'd come by the office quite a bit. And we would chat a lot about, because we would talk about this, a lot when you learn classical architecture, a building is a building, and it's got an order, and it's got an entrance, and it's got symmetry, and it's got other things that are classical architectural what's the word? Iconography? The things that make a building. I mean, a Greek temple is a Greek temple. He would say, why can't a building be a bird? And I completely agree with him. Why can't it be a bird? Yeah. But a lot depends on the client. If the client wants a bird, I will make sure that they have a bird. Yeah. Now, I use analogy with a lot of my work. I did a project for Esprit that was that had bow-shaped the sideways up-facing D-shaped bow trusses. Well, they were really pretty, but they were unengaged with the space. Remember how I said we don't live in the solid, we live in the space? So in that particular project, we built shoe racks that were very vertical right in the center with a pyramidal shaped skylight above it, so that there was an arrow that was drawing the bow into tension and then engaging the space like that. Now, did anybody notice that? Probably not. But it was something that helped me develop a design concept and a philosophy of how to engage the spaces one with the other.
Right.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think you had said something. I watched the 2 demo reels on your older website that you've got, and those are great. But in one of them, you talked a little bit about. I'm not going to phrase it the right way, but you talked about how important the why is. Asking the question, why am I doing something like this?
Yep.
Why am I designing it that way?
When I worked with the very fabulous designer Joe D'Urso for a while, and he was the guy who started me with that. Nobody did more with less than Joe D'Urso. I remembered when I had a chance to talk with him the first time, I was remembering a very old architectural digest that was a room with a column and a chair. That was it. But it was so rich, and I loved it. And we had some very interesting conversations. But we would always, do something, and he would say, well, why? Why is that there and not here? And I remember thinking, that's a great thing to do in all of life. Yeah. So Joe had a very interesting bit of philosophy, because I remember saying to him, so when I first saw you, your work was black and white with stainless steel, and then red, and now you're dealing with maybe 20 colors. He said, well, David, when I started, when I was your age, I kept my palette down. I did black and white so that I could work on the sculpture. And then once I got good at black and white, I added red. And then after I added red with brown and maybe a touch of blue. And then I started adding shades of brown, and I was able to develop my palette. I said, don't overstep your abilities. Do the best you can within what you know. Learn. Somebody else once told me we call architectural work the practice of architecture, because you never get it right. There's always something new to learn and something new to expand into and develop and grow with.
Yeah, clients have a tough time hearing that, right? They want to hear that you have all the answers. So
well, I when I was in graduate school, I became very good friends with a big time musician here in Los Angeles. And we were listening to something on the radio, and I said, "Does it break your heart to listen to that?" He said, "What are you talking about?" Because I was thinking, I just finished one of my presentations, like, "Oh, I could have moved that there. Oh, that could have been taller. Oh, that could have been pulled out." And I was regretting the things that I didn't do. And I said, he said, what are you talking about? Do I hate listening to that? And I said, well, when you play it live, do you play it the same? He says, oh, no, I'm so much better now than I was then. I said, well, then how can you not hate what you're listening to that's not as good as you're doing it now? He said, space and time, David, space and time. At that space that I was inhabiting at that time of my life, that was the best I could do. So I celebrate that and then move on with growth. So I think what I would basically tell my client is, you're getting the best David Applebaum that there's ever been.
Huh, interesting. It's a great perspective.
Oh, well.
David, talk about this foray into television, because the three of us actually share this in common, this interest in bridging the gap, let's say, between the public and the world of architecture. Doug has done it through his YouTube channel, which is, amazingly popular. Me with PBS and you with the National Geographic. So all of us wanted to do something beyond practice. Why did you feel this way?
I think that the field of architecture is quite cloistered. And I think that most people don't realize how important it is to deal with someone like us to help you get through. You can go on the internet and figure out how to get better from this particular ailment, but aren't you better off going to an actual doctor who knows what he's doing and can, at worst, prescribe antibiotics? So it's kind of like that with us. It pains me to say this, but on one of my recent trips to Houston, I spent some time with one of my friends, and his wife said, "What is it that an architect really does?"
Awesome.
And I couldn't decide whether to get angry or change my underwear. It was really awful for me to hear, because this is someone who actually had just done, which is why it came up in conversation, had just done a kitchen remodeling on her own. And overdid things, didn't plan for things, realized she needed a cutting board after inserted into the countertop after the countertop was already installed. And as we all know, you want a project to go over budget. What makes a project go over budget are changes. If it's been built and has to be torn out and rebuilt, that is the most expensive thing that you can do in the building process. So I said to her, when you did your kitchen, did you have any drawings? No. Did you have any specifications to tell them exactly what you wanted? No. I just showed them a magazine picture and gave them a description, and built it, and it was all wrong. I said, well, of course it was all wrong. I tell my clients, if it takes me an extra month to finish the drawings, but it means that you will not spend 10% more because we don't make any changes, do it. I mean, that's the reason why I'm very old school. I build models on almost every single one of my projects. Part of that's because I work with spaces, and when even if you're dealing with computer modeling, it's still on a two-dimensional screen. To actually build with your hands something that moves in and out and up and down, that's where the real discovery is, at least for me, and especially on my modern project. No, I do it on all of mine. I have a project here of the country cottage that I'm doing. That's because it's not if it's a box, yeah, go ahead and get your guy from Home Depot to build that from you in the parking lot. If it's just a box, or go to the shop and get one of those metal barns and put the metal barn in. But if you want something that means something, if you want something that inspires your life rather than just inhabits your life, for that, you need somebody who knows what they're doing. Now, there are some people that do that. I will tell you, maybe the most creative person I've ever met, well, I've got two, but the two most creative people that I've ever met that worked with, Kyle MacLachlan should be an architect or a designer. That guy has a great eye and a sensibility that it has artistry beyond just about anybody I've ever met. And the other one is Seth Green, the actor and producer and director and favorite ginger of all of ours. Seth Green is an amazingly astute and creative person. You want to talk about, he's a man who's always saying why. So when I present to him one of my projects, he will always say, well, why? And he's not saying why, like, why that's a stupid idea. It's like, why I want to learn. Right. Why? Because if I have an idea, because it's my house, I have input. And he's the guy who wanted the Indiana Jones bridge. Oh, I mean, he's a blast.
But let's go. That's interesting. But let's go back to this TV thing. So you did the show on National Geographic. But why did you do that? What was it for?
Well, that particular show was basically a biography show, but biography from the point of view of the house. So it's kind of like if the walls had ears. So, for instance, in John Rockefeller's house, you find out he didn't want a mansion. He just wanted to live in a little farmhouse in a community that was very similar, or a setting that was similar to the house that he grew up in as a poor child with a dirt floor. And even though he was the richest man on the face of the earth, at least private citizen on the face of the earth at the time, he really, his amassing of wealth had nothing to do with ego. I mean, a certain amount of ego, and he wants to be better than anyone else. But other than that, it wasn't about being showy. And so you learn about how in the show, we learn about how he lived in this farmhouse until it burned down with an accidental fire. And then his son, who was trying to have some kind of voice in the business and the life of his father, who was so busy, the mother, and it's funny, you then learn about all the women in this family that actually wielded so much of the power. The mother basically saying, hey, let our son be in charge of this. Let's let him build something appropriate for us. And so he and his father kind of butted heads, and they did this awful mishmash that was so ugly. They actually said, okay, this is not working. It's terrible. Let's remodel it. And in this case, son took over the whole thing and turned it into something quite special. And with it, gained the respect of his father. Gained the respect of his father, found his own voice, and became quite a businessman philanthropist after that. And then raised children, one of which who became the governor of New York and almost became president of the United States. So that kind of the process of building and why you choose a particular artistry and style and way to live. I mean, this was a house that did not have a grand staircase. You walked in, it's like, how do you get to the second floor? You don't know, because he didn't want people knowing how to get upstairs to the private spaces unless they were invited. And so you learn these really important things that I think make me a better architect, but also express to the general public, it's not four walls and a roof. I mean, to me, I make this analogy all the time. That's not a doorknob. That is a handshake that welcomes you into the next space. And I like to think of everything that way. And so as an opportunity to get that across to the masses, this show is a perfect opportunity.
Wow. That's really cool.
Are you doing any more? Are you trying to do any more?
I'm sorry?
Are you trying to do any more TV?
Yes, I think I think it's very, very, very difficult to do architecture on TV. When the producer of my show, his experience was doing cooking shows. He said, cooking shows, it takes 30 minutes to cook most meals. And if it takes longer, you pre-bake the chicken and then pull it out already done. You know, by the time you get, I mean, I have an interesting story about how I even first entered the world of TV, if you want to hear it. But Uh, I, I think because architecture takes permitting time and construction time, it just doesn't work on a TV schedule. I would love to teach. I mean, listen to me talking about, suggestions on way. I would love to teach, but there aren't that many professorships out there. And I've tried, but it's really difficult. And nowadays, if you don't have a PhD, it's really difficult. And it's a shame because I think architecture being a practical field, philosophical, yes, of course, but it's also practical. There should be more teachers out there that actually have been through the process of dealing with clients and dealing with codes and dealing with permits and finding a way to fight for the art. And there isn't enough of that. Most professors are either just drafting and construction methods or just philosophy. There needs to be that mix, because I think that's going to also make our profession more understandable to the masses. But there aren't that many shows. And most of the shows that are on, I mean, I've been on a couple of auditions, and it's a bunch of 6'2", well-built men, and then little short, bald me. It's like, one of these things is not like the other. And it's like, okay, so you walk up to a couple of things, are you an architect? Oh, no, I'm a model. It's like, well, then, why are you here? Well, I took a drafting class in high school. That just worked for me. And it's like, oh my God, this is what's perpetuating what it is that we do? Come on.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your office and your role in the office. How many people do you have?
That's a very interesting question. One of my favorite professors at UCLA was very, very good friends with Frank Gehry, and he passed away. Of course, not Frank Gehry, my professor, at 50. And at the funeral, wow. Frank Gehry said to me, it's funny how architecture works, because in your 20s, you're a slave. You work for minimum wage. You barely get a point of view allowed in anything. Your 30s, you start actually getting a chance to say something. You might do a project on the side. If you're lucky in your 40s, you put your shingle out, but you'll take any kind of work and you'll do whatever they say. It's your 50s where you start actually having a chance to express yourself. And it's your 60s where you actually get the work. And this gentleman passed away at 50. He said his work was already good. Can you imagine what the next 10 years would have done for him?
Yeah.
So, sorry, I went off on a tangent. What was your original question?
It was, I wanted to hear a little bit about your office, perhaps how many people you have working for you. What's your role in the office?
Yeah. So, so at the time, most of us, when we go out on our own, first we work on the side and do the projects on the side. Then we get brave enough to say, excuse me, I'm quitting and I'm starting my own space. And then if you're lucky, you hire one person and then you hire two people. But that means you have to have 4 times as much work. And then you have 10 people and then you have 50 people. Excuse me. Well, I had 2 employees and I was getting ready to hire my 3rd and 4th. And I was lamenting the fact that I was not designing very much anymore. I was orchestrating and I was delegating. And I had a big meeting every Thursday with a particular client. And it was Monday, and I asked the project captain to show me what she had done. And I cannot even begin to tell you all the things that were messed up.
Oh, boy.
It's really important that a staircase align on the 1st and 2nd floor. Because if they don't, you're coming up on the 1st floor, you'll hit your head on the ceiling, and because the opening is 4 feet over. Well, that's what somehow she had messed up. And, I mean, among other things. And it was so awful, I thought it was going to take me a month to fix. So I had to relieve her of her duties. And I called the client and said, my project captain is sick. Can we not meet on Thursday? I might be able to get it by Monday. He said, we'll just meet the following Thursday. I fixed it in a day. and I fixed it in a better way than it had been done originally. And I called them and said, hey, let's meet on Thursday. I'm ready. And they said, oh, no, we already made other plans. Meet the other Thursday. By not having this employee, when billing came in and I was bringing money in and paying people out, I made a lot more money that month because I wasn't paying my project architect.
Yeah.
At the same time, we found out that my wife at the time was pregnant. And I wanted very badly to be a present father. And I then made a decision that I was going to take on less work, but better work. I was going to charge my full price and not cut my fees. And I was going to only take on the clients that were willing to do the kinds of experiments into what is that makes your life what it is, and how can I make it better through a home, not just a house, but a home. And I would say that the next maybe 10 years of my life were some of the greatest I've ever had as a professional, because it was just me and one other person. And I no longer passed things off to a project architect. I did it all myself, with a little bit of help, of course, but I did it all myself, because when you hire David Applebaum Architect, you no longer hire my name and then it gets passed off to someone else. I mean, I was on the building and grounds committee of my son's private school, and we were doing an addition, and I was asked to be the architect, and I said, I don't want to be going to school here and working for us at the same time. Plus, that really wasn't my expertise. So I said, I'll be happy to be the voice in your ear. And our project architect changed 3 times over 2 years. And the design became unbelievably watered down because there was no single voice carrying it through. And those 3 factors made it so that what I really wanted to do was not work in that standard parameter, but make it more of an atelier. So I have a very small office. Now, I will say that the recession messed everything up. I was in some ways set up for it. Of course, offices with 10 people all of a sudden became offices with 2.
Right.
And I was kind of already there. And regretfully, the recession has made it so that most architects are now all cutting their fees, because between the recession and people doing it for nothing, I would have somebody interview and say, so if I hire you for an architect, do you have a credit card? Yeah, why do you need to know if I have a credit card? Well, you're going to be buying all the lumber and the toilets and the wires, but of course I'll pay you back. Thank you. It was nice meeting you. I know my way out. So with people that were actually taking that kind of work, and then all of the flippers coming in and taking half of the potential projects away, and with the fact that now what used to be a 9-month permit process is now an 18-month permit process.
Oh my gosh.
It's, look, I mean, I'm doing a project in Houston right now, and I tell everybody what I love about it more than anything else is the building code there is 20 pages long. In LA, it's 20 volumes long.
You know, David, this is really interesting to hear this, because I have a similar kind of story with you where, you know, after the recession, I went to go work for a big corporate office. And it was like 150 people in there. And it was really impressive offices. And the developer would come in there, and the principal would show them around and say, you know, look at all this horsepower and look at everything we have here. And introduce them to me and said, so Stephen will be your architect. But of course, I'll be the principal. I'll be there for everything. And then he left, right? He would never see him again. And basically, I designed the project myself, 100-unit building myself. And I think the guy was under the impression that he was buying this big edifice and all these people. And in fact, he wasn't. He was just buying one person. And when I left, I said, I don't really need all this other stuff. If he's going to come to me and he wants me to work on these projects, I mean, you need to find the person you want to work with. Maybe there's support for both of us if there's some staff or whatever, but it's really like, who are you working with? Are you working with this big corporate firm? Who in the firm are you working with? Who are you hiring?
Yeah.
It's really important. People don't get that. They don't understand that. They think I'm going to hire this 150 person office. It's like, who are you working with?
Right. And with the trouble with a 150 person office is there's a couple of employees there that are all about, we have to stop working. No more hours on this project. We're not making enough money to meet our corporate goals. Well, it's just me. If I need to put in more hours, I stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning and put in more hours, because that's what needs to be done. And there's no a bureaucrat saying, oh, we aren't meeting our, look at the pie chart. It's not working the way it's supposed to be. So, I guess if you're going to be doing something like a stadium, you have to have that kind of horsepower. I get it. But the thing is, when you hire one of those companies, they've got initials in their name, not even a real name. Those initials usually are people that are long retired, if not passed away. And you're really hiring a machine, and the cogs of a machine, not even the machine. And you were saying I worked at a 150-person firm. My stomach turned upside down when you said that, because I can't imagine how that would ever work in a way that would be pleasant.
It's funny because you're in Hollywood, and I actually was telling somebody about this way of working, and I referred to Jerry Maguire, the movie where he's a sports agent, Tom Cruise is a sports agent, and he leaves the big agency, and he says that I'm going to be my own guy. You're going to work with me directly, and of course everyone their mouths open, and they all kind of think it's a terrible idea. But then later on, it kind of works, and I kind of tell them that instead of me delegating to these people I'm hiring in order to do basically the job, I've always wanted to be the designer, and now suddenly I'm saying you do it when I'll watch over you, and I think, why did I do that? And so I think I want to work with you directly, whatever the client is, and I'm going to be there, and I care about this project as much as you do. It's not like some employee that's working for me is going to, put in their time. So I use that example all the time.
And by the way, that employee, when they're an employee, they never have the investment in it that you do. And I think that's also really important.
That's a great point.
Yeah, very true. Can you tell us about some of your favorite clients, maybe even a name or two?
That's a tough one, because as a whole, I've enjoyed every single one of them. I mean, I'm trying to think of
first people with, I have an experience where people that make their money are a lot easier to deal with than people that inherited money, as an example.
Oh, that's true.
So the kind of work that I do, so anything like that, an anecdote.
Well, I have to say, I'll say this. I would say Frank Sinatra was maybe the smartest man I've ever known, especially to people. He, in 2 seconds, could figure out how to get the most out of you. He was a fine manager of people. He was brilliant. Oh, the stories I have of that guy, I guess I could share some of them. He's the biggest story of all of them was, I'm also a believer in good beginnings make good endings much easier. So when you're doing a house, I'm paying most attention to when they're setting the foundation up, because if they miss a dimension in concrete, what are you going to do? Tear it out? And if it's not completely straight, the doors don't hang right, the windows don't hang right, the walls aren't straight. So I used to, when I was younger, walk around with a briefcase and Ziploc bags. And I would walk around the job site and pick up a washer, put it in the Ziploc, and put it in my briefcase, so that the workers would say, oh my gosh, if he's going to look at that washer at his office, I better do a really immaculate job.
Oh my gosh.
So I was working on Frank's Beach House, and I was there watching as they were doing the foundation setup, and it happens to be a particular concrete subcontractor who I adore, whose formwork is like cabinetry. It's so perfect. And so we were kind of having some fun joking, and all of a sudden this white Rolls Royce with a blue convertible top down pulls into the parking lot with four guys. You couldn't fit a fifth. They were like 500 pounds, triple chin, broken nose, shiny suit, skinny ties, slick back hair, and the guy gets out of the passenger side and kind of adjusts his tie and says, so who's in charge? Is the architect here today? And it's like, oh my God. They're gonna
it's the mob.
In cement galoshes and throw me in the ocean. And I'm reviewing everything I said. Like, what did I do? Am I in trouble? And I'm freaking out. And somebody must have pointed. It's like, so you're the architect? In I just hit puberty. Yes, I'm David Applebaum. And And the guy says, so we understand one of the neighbors is complaining about the noise, and we wanted to have a little conversation with him. Now, I should say, he didn't complain about the noise. He came over very politely, said, look, one of these days I'm a remodel. I don't want to stop you from building, but I'm in the entertainment industry. I get home at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night. I don't wake up till 7 or 8. So if you can just keep the heavy racket until 8, we won't have a problem. And you know, just be a good neighbor. I was like, sure, no problem, of course. Anyway, the guy gets into the car. They back up, pull over, you know, like 60 feet to the next driveway, pull in, all four get out. We're all looking with eyes the size of saucers. They knock on the door. They let themselves in. And what seemed like a lifetime, but might have only been 15 minutes, passes by. They get back in the car. They pull out. They come over to our driveway, and as they stop, the guy in the passenger seat looks at me and says, so we've reached an agreement. You can make noise whenever you want. Have a nice day. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God. And then it hit me. Those guys could have been from Central Casting. Might have been the real thing, but he was smart enough that he could do something like that and nobody would know.
Oh my gosh, that's
great.
so funny. That is a great story.
But, you know, Cuba Gooding Jr. My favorite thing. I mean, my favorite thing about Cuba was the 3 times that he broke into tears.
Wow.
I'm getting chills thinking about it right now. When we started doing the second floor, and there was plywood up on the second floor, but no walls, but they chalked it out. The contractor said, hey, you want to see how your second floor is going to lay out? And we said, yeah. So let's get a ladder. Cuba climbed the studs, okay, and just was up there so I went up first because the contractor was very, you know, deferential. And as I got up, I walked up to him, and he stands up. He says, this is my bathroom? And I said, yeah. And he hugged me, and he started crying. He said, when I was a kid, my father left us, and my brother, my sister, and I stayed in a hotel room the size of my bathroom, and now this is my bathroom. You've made my dreams come true.
Oh my God, that's unbelievable.
With that kind of stuff, that's, you know, when 6 months after I did Sherry Lewis's house, she calls me and she says, I'm just sitting here in my bed looking out my window, and I can't imagine anything about this house that I want different than what I had before. And you have made me so happy.
Wow.
You know, that kind of stuff. I mean, it just, I personally, look, I might not make as much money as the next guy by doing it the way that I'm doing it, but you got to look at yourself in the mirror every day, and you have to love. When my son was 14 and he was such a great guitar player. I mean, there were professionals that knew who he was, and he was jamming with people in the music world. And he said, you know, I don't want to do it anymore. I want to try something else. And it was like, fine. It was like, you're not mad. It's like, no, you need to find something you love, and you're good at this, but you don't love it. Find what you love, and you'll never work a day in your life. And so he has luckily seems to have found that path, and this is the way that my path is.
Wow.
Hey, so David, we have to end because we've had an hour here. This has been an amazing conversation. You know, I love because I'm sure people would like to get in contact with you. How can they find you? Where can they learn more about you? Give us some.
As we joked before, I have a very old website that has Flash because I don't necessarily want people to be looking on their phones, because I find that most people that shop for their architects on the internet are looking for the cheapest price, which is just not what I do. I mean, I certainly earn my my fee, and I have saved my clients double what my fee is, and I can show it on paper with pretty much every single project I've done. But, you know, my name is David Applebaum, and my website is davidapplebaum.com. So that has pretty much everything you need on it. Just, you have to look at it on a computer, because I don't think it works on a tablet or a phone.
I love it.
You
don't really need a website from what we can tell.
Well, oh, no, trust me. You know, here's the funny thing is, you would think that if your projects came in on time and on budget, okay, and you were responsible. If they say, I have $200,000 or $20 million, you build accordingly, and you give them what they want, and you're very involved, that they would come slamming the door down for your work. That's really what I thought. But I kind of think maybe a lot of people like to complain because they still go back to the guys who their projects come in $1 million over budget in a year over time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and they seem to love it. I mean, I know movie star who, when I met him, he was already in the middle of his remodeling or his tear down and building a new house. His project ended up being 2.5 years over time.
Wow.
And $3 million over budget. But he swears that it's the best house in the whole wide world. So
he's got to. It's his house.
I guess. But and I'm not going to say that it's not a great house. It is. But I look at this and say, you know what? If they would have done it this way, they would have saved $100,000 there and $400,000. I remember seeing a house. Sorry, I'm taking so much more time. But when I was first starting out, there was a house that our electrical contractor wanted me to see because they had reglets, little recessed horizontal lines that had to be lasered throughout the house. They were in the doors, the door frames, the windows, the walls. See, now I would have had it on the walls, stopped it at the door frame, and then come around. So if you're off by 1/4 inch, nobody knows. But you still get the same idea. As a matter of fact, I found there were too many stripes. I found it was almost like one of those weird optical illusions where your eye keeps on jumping. And in reality, it didn't work as well as they wanted it to. But by making it so precise, I talked to the contractor about it. That house was $700,000 extra just to get all of those reglets.
Just for the reveals.
Lined up. And it was, I just, that seems like a waste to me. Plus, I don't think it was very artistic. It was lazy.
Yeah.
Well, that's a fantastic way to end the show, right? Talking about reglets and laziness.
Yes. Okay.
Hey, David, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This is awesome you did this.
I had a blast. Hey, I'm only giving you like 1/4 of my stories. So if you ever want to
have you back on.
I love it.
Okay.
Well, thank you very
we'll
much, David. Great to meet you.
Likewise. Be well, guys.
All right, man. Take care.
You've been listening to the Design Your Dream Home podcast with Doug and Steve. If you have any questions or want to give us any feedback on the show, feel free to reach us through our website at thedougandsteveshow.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.